The wind felt colder than usual as Emily Parker waited at the bus stop with her 5-year-old son, Noah. His small hand clutched hers tightly, while his other hand held a paper cup of lukewarm cocoa. The morning traffic roared past, and for a moment she wondered if this city would ever stop moving long enough for her to catch her breath. 2 months ago, her landlord had given her 3 days to leave. She'd already lost her job at the diner, and every application since then had been met with polite rejection. She told herself that things would get better, that God wouldn't let her fall too far, but lately, even her faith felt tired. Then came the job listing she'd almost ignored. A live-in nanny needed for 1 child, room and board included, excellent pay. It had sounded too good to be real, but she'd applied anyway. The interview was that morning in a part of town she'd only seen on postcards. She looked down at Noah. "You ready, buddy?" she asked with a soft smile. He nodded, his front teeth missing. "Do you think they'll like me?" Emily brushed his hair back. "They'd be lucky to have you." The mansion sat at the top of a long driveway lined with tall, perfectly trimmed trees. Emily could feel her heartbeat in her throat as she pressed the intercom. "Yes?" came a woman's voice, calm, clipped. "Hi, this is Emily Parker. I'm here for the nanny interview." A short pause, then the gates swung open silently. Inside, the air smelled faintly of lavender and money. Marble floors, high ceilings, white furniture. Everything so clean she was afraid to breathe too hard. A middle-aged housekeeper greeted her and guided them through the hall. "The Mr. Stone will see you shortly," she said. Mr. Stone. The name matched what Emily had read online. Daniel Stone, a tech billionaire who rarely appeared in public since his wife's death 3 years ago. Every photo she'd found of him had the same expression. Cold, unreadable eyes. When he entered the room, he was exactly as she remembered, tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a charcoal suit that looked custom-made. His presence filled the space like a storm about to break. "Miss Parker," he said, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming." His voice was deep, smooth but distant. Emily shook his hand, aware of how rough hers felt against his. "Thank you for seeing me." He motioned for her to sit. "I'll be direct. I need someone trustworthy. My daughter, Lily, is 6. Since my wife passed, I've gone through 5 nannies. I work long hours, and I don't tolerate dishonesty or drama." Emily's stomach twisted. "I understand." He studied her for a long moment. "You have a child?" "Yes, sir, Noah. He's 5. He glanced toward the boy, who was sitting quietly on the edge of the couch, legs swinging. "Would he live here as well?" "Yes. I don't have anyone else to look after him." Silence stretched between them. Emily could almost hear the sound of her hope fading. Then Daniel said quietly, "Your references are solid. The position is yours on a trial basis." Her mouth fell open. "Really?" He nodded once. "You'll start tomorrow. Speak to Mrs. Harper about your room and salary." Emily felt her eyes sting. "Thank you, Mr. Stone. You won't regret it." As she led Noah out of the mansion, her heart pounded with both relief and fear. She didn't know what kind of man Daniel Stone truly was, but she knew this was their second chance. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the grief that lived in the house, she hoped there was still warmth to be found. The first morning at the Stone mansion felt like walking into someone else's dream. Emily woke to the soft sound of birds and the faint hum of the fountain outside her window. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too white, and the sunlight too golden to belong to her. Then she turned her head and saw Noah, curled up beside her, his little body lost in the enormous blanket. Reality came rushing back. This wasn't home, but maybe, just maybe, it could be. After breakfast, the housekeeper, Mrs. Harper, guided her around the house. "The kitchen closes at 8, she explained. "Mr. Stone doesn't like noise after 9. Lily's playroom is down this hall. You'll find her routine on the fridge." Emily nodded, trying to remember everything. The mansion was spotless, so polished that her reflection followed her through every room. It was beautiful, but cold, the kind of place that had forgotten laughter. When they reached the playroom, a small girl sat alone at a low table, coloring quietly. Her light brown hair was tied into neat braids, and her pink dress looked freshly ironed. She didn't look up as they entered. "Lily," Mrs. Harper said softly. "This is Miss Parker. She'll be staying with us from now on." Lily raised her eyes briefly. They were the same piercing blue as her father's. "Hello," she said in a polite, almost rehearsed tone. "Hi, sweetheart," Emily said, crouching down to her level. "I'm Emily. I'm really happy to meet you." The girl nodded, eyes returning to her paper. "Do you like coloring?" Emily asked, sitting beside her. "Yes." "Can I see what you're drawing?" "It's a castle," Lily murmured, still not looking up. "But it's missing a queen," Emily smiled. "Maybe you'll draw one later?" Lily's pencil stopped. "There used to be one," she whispered, almost too quietly to hear. Then she pushed the drawing away. "I don't draw her anymore." Emily's chest ached. She didn't need anyone to explain, and she could feel the silence that surrounded the late Mrs. Stone like a shadow no one wanted to disturb. That afternoon, Noah joined them. Within minutes, the quiet room filled with laughter as the two children built towers out of colorful blocks. Lily's giggles came hesitantly at first, like she'd forgotten how. Emily watched them, warmth spreading through her chest. When Daniel appeared at the doorway, his usual calm expression faltered. He didn't say anything, just stood there, watching his daughter smile, for what might have been the first time in months. Emily glanced up and met his eyes. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. His gaze softened just slightly before he cleared his throat. "I see you've met Lily," he said, his tone quieter than usual. "Yes," Emily replied. "She's wonderful." Lily beamed at that, and Daniel's eyes flickered toward her. "It's been a while since anyone's called her that," he said softly. Then, almost as quickly, he straightened. "Dinner is at 7. Mrs. Harper will show you the dining room." He left as suddenly as he'd come. But Emily noticed something, the tiniest shift in his posture, a man torn between duty and something deeper he couldn't let himself feel. Later that night, as Emily tucked Noah into bed, she caught herself smiling. "Do you like it here?" she whispered. Noah nodded sleepily. "It's big, and Lily's nice." Emily brushed his curls back. "Good, then we'll be okay." She looked out the window, the city lights shimmering in the distance. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. She didn't know that Daniel Stone, alone in his study across the hall, was thinking the same thing, only he couldn't understand why the sound of her laugh had stayed in his mind all evening. The next few days passed in a blur of small moments that began to feel like a rhythm. Emily woke before sunrise, cooked breakfast, helped Lily get ready for school, and spent her afternoons tidying and organizing the playroom. She tried to keep her presence quiet, respectful of the unspoken rules that seemed to fill the mansion's halls. But Daniel Stone was everywhere, even when he wasn't in the room. His name hung in the air, carried in the way the staff spoke, in the way everyone paused when they heard his footsteps. He ruled his world with silence and order. On Thursday morning, Emily found him in the kitchen, reading something on his tablet with a cup of black coffee beside him. He was already dressed for work, perfectly pressed and precise. She hesitated at the doorway, unsure whether to speak. "Good morning, Mr. Stone," she said softly. He looked up. "Good morning, Miss Parker. You're up early." "I'm making pancakes," she said, lifting the mixing bowl. "Lily mentioned she hasn't had any in a while." He raised a brow. "That's because she doesn't eat breakfast food, just toast and fruit." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe she'll make an exception today." He didn't reply, but his gaze lingered longer than before, on the way she whisked the batter, on the curls that fell over her face as she moved around the kitchen with quiet confidence. There was something unforced about her. Something warm. It unsettled him. When Lily came down and smelled the pancakes, her face lit up. "Are those for me?" Emily nodded. "If you want them." Lily looked at her father, almost seeking permission. Daniel sighed. "Just one," he said. But after one bite, Lily couldn't stop. She laughed when Emily drizzled syrup into a smiley face on her plate. Daniel sat back, his usual stern expression fading just a little. For the first time in a long while, breakfast didn't feel like a formality. It felt like a family. Later that afternoon, Emily found herself outside, watching Noah and Lily play in the garden. The laughter that echoed through the courtyard sounded like sunlight, pure and full. She closed her eyes for a moment, just to breathe it in. "You've managed what no one else could," a deep voice said behind her. She turned. Daniel stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" "Lily," he said quietly. "She hasn't smiled like that in years." Her heart squeezed at the honesty in his tone. "She just needed someone to listen?" He studied her. "And you do that?" "I try to," she said softly. "Sometimes people just need to be seen, not fixed." For a moment, Daniel said nothing. The wind brushed through the trees, stirring the silence between them. His gaze softened in a way that made her chest tighten. "You're different," he said finally. Emily gave a small laugh. "I get that a lot." He smiled, barely, but it was real. It changed his face entirely, made him look younger, less burdened. "It's not a bad thing," he said, almost to himself. That night, as Emily folded laundry in her room, her mind replayed that moment. The way his eyes had softened, the rare hint of warmth in his voice. She scolded herself for even thinking about it. He was her boss. He was also a man who had buried his heart a long time ago. And yet, something was shifting between them, quietly, like a slow sunrise. In the study down the hall, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at a report he couldn't focus on. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her calmness, her laughter, the way she looked at his daughter like she truly cared. It wasn't supposed to matter, but it did. For the first time in years, Daniel Stone wasn't thinking about business or loss. He was thinking about the woman who'd brought light back into his house, without even trying. By the end of her first week, Emily had learned two things about Daniel Stone. The first was that he liked control. Everything in his home ran like clockwork. The second was that beneath all that order, he was quietly hurting. Sometimes she'd catch him standing at the edge of the garden, staring out into nothing. Other times, she'd find a faint trace of sadness in his voice when he spoke about Lily. He never mentioned his late wife, and no one in the house dared to. But the silence around her was louder than any memory. That Saturday morning, Emily was helping Lily bake cookies in the kitchen when Daniel walked in unexpectedly. The smell of vanilla and melted butter filled the air. "Daddy, look!" Lily said proudly, holding up a heart-shaped cookie. "I made it for you." Daniel paused, his hand tightening slightly around his phone. He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "That's lovely, sweetheart." Emily noticed the way he hesitated before taking it. She could tell the shape, the smell, something about it reminded him of someone he'd lost. Lily didn't notice. She handed him the cookie with both hands. "Miss Emily said you like chocolate chips." Daniel's gaze flicked toward her, just for a moment. "Did she now?" Emily smiled gently. "Just a guess." He took a bite, then cleared his throat. "It's good," he said softly. "Really good." Lily beamed, proud and happy, and Emily's heart swelled at the sight. But when Daniel turned away to take a call, the warmth vanished. His voice grew colder, sharper, the voice of a man used to command. By the time he hung up, his expression was unreadable again. That evening, Emily went to return a folded blanket to the living room when she noticed something on the piano, an old photo in a silver frame. It showed Daniel, younger, holding a woman with soft blonde hair and a glowing smile. Their eyes were full of life. Emily felt a pang in her chest. The late Isabella Stone, the woman who had once made this house a home. She didn't hear Daniel enter until his voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't touch that." Emily spun around, startled. I wasn't, I was just looking," he finished quietly. "Everyone does." "I'm sorry," she said, lowering her gaze. "It's a beautiful photo." He exhaled slowly, his voice low. "She loved that picture. Said it made us look like a magazine cover." A small, almost broken smile crossed his face. That was the last summer before she got sick. Emily didn't know what to say. The pain in his eyes was raw, not the kind you could fix, just the kind you had to feel. "I didn't mean to intrude," she whispered. "You didn't," he said after a pause. "You just reminded me of her." Her breath caught. "Of her?" He nodded slightly. "Not the way you look, it's the way you are with Lily. Gentle, patient. You make her laugh again." Emily's throat tightened. "She's easy to love." He looked at her for a long moment. "So was Isabella," he murmured, and then, almost too quickly, turned away. "Dinner will be ready soon." When he left the room, Emily stood still, her heart thudding softly in her chest. She wasn't sure what hurt more, being compared to a woman she could never replace, or realizing that a part of him still lived in the past. That night, Daniel sat alone in his study, staring at the same photograph. For the first time, he wasn't sure what scared him more, forgetting his wife, or feeling something new. Because every time Emily smiled, it felt like both were happening at once. Sunday morning came quiet and golden, the kind of day that felt like a pause in the world. Emily found herself in the garden with a cup of tea, watching Noah and Lily chase bubbles across the lawn. Their laughter floated through the air like music. For a brief moment, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, peace could feel this simple. "Good morning." The deep voice startled her. She turned to find Daniel standing a few feet away, dressed casually for once, dark jeans, a plain white shirt, no tie. The sight made her blink. He looked younger, almost human in the morning light. "Good morning," she said, smiling. "I didn't know you came out here." "I don't," he admitted, his hands in his pockets. "Usually too busy, but today felt different." Emily nodded. "It's nice. The kids seem happy." His gaze followed hers toward Lily, who was giggling as Noah tried to pop her bubbles. His expression softened in a way that made her heart squeeze. "She hasn't laughed like that since." He paused, clearing his throat. "Since before Isabella got sick." Emily said nothing. She just let the silence settle comfortable, not forced. Daniel glanced at her. "You have a way of making things calm," he said quietly, "even when everything feels chaotic." Emily smiled faintly. "Maybe because chaos used to be all I knew." He tilted his head. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, not sure if it was her place to open up, but something about his tone made her trust him. "Before this, Noah and I were barely managing. I worked nights at a diner, slept maybe 4 hours a day, and tried to keep him safe. When I saw your job posting, I almost didn't apply. I didn't think someone like you would ever hire someone like me." Daniel frowned. "Someone like me?" She met his eyes. "Powerful, perfect, untouchable." He gave a quiet laugh, the kind that sounded almost like disbelief. "Perfect? You've clearly never seen me try to cook breakfast." Emily smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. It was the first time she'd heard him tease, even lightly. Then, after a pause, he said, "I wasn't always this person, you know." Her curiosity flickered. "Who were you before?" He looked down at his hands. "A man with too many dreams, and not enough time to live them. Isabella used to say I'd burn myself out trying to build the world instead of being part of it." "And did you?" He took a deep breath. "I think I did. And when she died, I stopped trying altogether." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. This was the man beneath the billionaire, the one the tabloids would never show. Not cold, not cruel, just lonely. Emily's voice softened. "You're still here. That has to mean something." He looked at her, really looked at her, as if trying to read the meaning behind her words. "You believe that?" "I do." A long silence followed, not heavy, but charged, the kind that made every second feel like more than just air between them. Finally, Daniel spoke. "You're good for this house, Emily. For Lily. And maybe even for me." Her chest tightened. "I'm just doing my job." He smiled faintly. "That's what you think." Later that night, Emily stood by her window, watching the lights of the city fade. She told herself not to read into his words, not to imagine something that couldn't exist, but her heart betrayed her, replaying the way he'd looked at her, like she wasn't invisible anymore. And in his study, Daniel sat alone again, only this time, he wasn't staring at his wife's photo. He was thinking of Emily Parker, and wondering when the sound of her laughter had become the only thing that made this house feel alive. By Friday afternoon, the mansion buzzed with subtle energy. Boxes were being packed, suitcases loaded, and Mrs. Harper moved briskly between rooms with her clipboard. Emily, folding Lily's clothes into a small pink suitcase, finally asked, "Is something happening?" Mrs. Harper looked up. "Mr. Stone decided to take the weekend off. It's been years since he's done that. He's taking you, the children, and the driver to the lake house." Emily blinked. "Me?" "Yes, Lily won't go without you." The words sank in slowly. She had known Lily was getting attached, but hearing it out loud did something strange to her chest, equal parts warmth and fear. The drive to the lake house took 3 hours. Noah and Lily slept most of the way, their heads leaning together in the back seat. Emily sat quietly beside them, glancing out at the endless stretch of green hills and open sky. When they finally arrived, she couldn't help but gasp. The house wasn't just beautiful, it was alive. Surrounded by pine trees and overlooking a vast silver lake, it felt nothing like the cold mansion. The windows were open, the air smelled like rain and pine wood, and birds sang from somewhere unseen. Daniel stepped out of the car first, rolling up his sleeves as he looked around. "It's been a while," he said softly. "Isabella loved this place." Emily watched him for a moment, the way his voice softened when he said his late wife's name. There was love there still, but it wasn't sharp anymore. It was quieter, sadder. The afternoon passed gently. The children played by the water, their laughter echoing across the lake. Emily sat on the wooden porch, sketching shapes in her notebook while Daniel grilled lunch a few feet away. "I didn't know you could cook," she said teasingly. He smirked slightly. "Don't tell my board members. They think I only know how to sign checks." She laughed. "Your secret's safe with me." He handed her a plate grilled chicken, vegetables, and corn on the cob. "I used to cook with Isabella. She'd do all the seasoning, and I'd ruin it by burning everything." Emily smiled gently. "Then it's good you learned." "Maybe I had the right teacher this time," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers. The moment stretched between them soft, fragile, dangerous. She looked away first, pretending to focus on Noah splashing water. Her heart raced. That evening, after dinner, Daniel lit a small fire outside by the lake. The children sat wrapped in blankets, roasting marshmallows and whispering stories. Emily watched them with a content smile. Daniel handed her a cup of hot chocolate. Their fingers brushed. The touch lingered just long enough to feel like something real. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded, staring into the flames. "You know, I used to hate silence. After Isabella died, it was unbearable. Now, it doesn't feel so empty anymore." Emily looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because of Lily." He hesitated. "Because of you." Her breath caught. She looked down, unsure what to say. The fire crackled, filling the space where words failed. Noah's sleepy voice broke the silence. "Miss Emily, can we stay here forever?" She smiled, stroking his hair. "I wish we could, sweetheart." Daniel glanced at her, his expression unreadable but tender. "Maybe we can," he said softly, though neither of them knew if he meant the house or the feeling that came with it. That night, when the children were asleep, Emily stood on the porch, watching the moonlight shimmer on the lake. Daniel joined her quietly. For a while, neither spoke. "You make this place feel alive again," he said finally. Emily turned to him, her heart trembling. Maybe it was never dead. Maybe it was just waiting. He looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, the distance between them felt like something that could break. Neither moved, but the air between them said everything words couldn't. The return to the mansion was quieter than the trip to the lake. The children slept most of the way back, worn out from laughter and sunlight. Emily, though, couldn't sleep at all. Her mind kept replaying every small thing from the weekend, Daniel's rare smile, his hand brushing hers, the way his eyes softened whenever she spoke. She'd told herself it was just kindness, gratitude maybe, but deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. When the car pulled up to the house, the silence that greeted them felt heavier than before. The mansion, with all its beauty, suddenly seemed colder again. Monday morning started as usual. Lily went to school, Noah played in the garden, and Daniel left early for work. Emily spent the day cleaning and catching up on small chores. But something had changed. The staff's eyes lingered on her a little too long. The usual polite greetings came with forced smiles. Mrs. Harper, usually warm, spoke more formally than usual. At lunch, Emily finally asked, "Is everything okay?" The older woman hesitated. "It's nothing you need to worry about, Miss Parker." Emily frowned. "Please, Mrs. Harper, if I've done something wrong." Mrs. Harper sighed. "It's just, people talk. You know how it is. The staff saw how close you and Mr. Stone seemed over the weekend." Emily's heart skipped. "Close?" Mrs. Harper gave her a careful look. "They think there's more between you than there should be?" "I would never." Emily's voice caught. "He's my employer." "I know," Mrs. Harper said gently. "And I believe you, but not everyone sees what I see. They forget he's still grieving and that you're just trying to help." Emily nodded, her chest tight. "Thank you for telling me." When she was alone again, she stood by the window, watching the garden blur behind her reflection. The rumors didn't hurt because they were false. They hurt because a small, guilty part of her wished they weren't. That evening, Daniel returned earlier than usual. Lily ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Daddy! Guess what? Miss Emily helped me draw a butterfly today." He smiled, setting down his briefcase. "Is that so?" "Yes, and she said if I finish my dinner, she'll read me a story." Daniel looked toward Emily, a faint warmth flickering in his expression. "That sounds like a fair deal." Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, everything else disappeared. But then a voice interrupted one of the maids passing through the hallway, whispering something to another as they walked past. Emily couldn't catch every word, but she didn't need to. She knew. Daniel must have sensed it too, because his gaze darkened slightly. "Is something going on?" She shook her head quickly. "It's nothing." He frowned. "Emily, really?" she insisted softly. "Let's not make it a thing." He hesitated, then gave a slow nod. "If anyone says anything that makes you uncomfortable, tell me." "I can handle it," she said, forcing a small smile. "I know you can," he replied, "but you shouldn't have to." His voice carried a quiet protectiveness that made her heart ache. Later that night, as she was heading to her room, Emily passed Daniel's study. The door was half open, light spilling out. She saw him sitting at his desk, his hands clasped in thought, staring out the window. For a moment, she wanted to step in to tell him she was fine, that the whispers didn't matter, that she knew how heavy everything still was for him. But she stopped herself. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be redrawn. She turned away quietly and closed her door behind her. But as she lay awake, one thought refused to leave her mind. If love was something she wasn't supposed to feel, why did it already hurt like this? By Tuesday, something had shifted. Daniel wasn't avoiding her, not exactly, but there was a new kind of quiet in the air. He still greeted her politely in the mornings, still asked about Lily's meals and homework. But the warmth that had started to grow between them after the lake trip seemed to have disappeared overnight. Emily told herself not to take it personally. He was her boss. He had a company to run. Maybe he was just busy. But the silence felt personal. It felt like a door she didn't know she'd opened had suddenly closed again. That afternoon, she found Lily sitting alone in the playroom, her crayons untouched. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Emily asked, kneeling beside her. Lily shrugged. "Daddy didn't say good morning today. He always says good morning." Emily brushed a strand of hair from the little girl's face. "Maybe he had a hard day at work. Grown-ups get tired sometimes." Lily's lip trembled. "When Mommy was sad, She stopped talking too. Then she went away. Emily's heart cracked at the innocence in her voice. She pulled Lily into a hug. Your daddy loves you more than anything. He just misses her sometimes, that's all. Lily nodded slowly, resting her small head on Emily's shoulder. You make it better, she whispered. Emily held her tighter. You make it better too. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, Emily went downstairs to check on the laundry. As she crossed the hall, she saw Daniel in his study sleeves rolled up, tie loosened, staring at a pile of papers without actually reading them. She hesitated at the door. Mr. Stone. He looked up, startled. Emily, I didn't hear you. You've been in here all day, she said gently. You should rest. He leaned back, rubbing his temples. I can't. There's too much going on. Investors, deadlines. He stopped himself. It's nothing you need to worry about. Emily stepped closer. I may not know about business, but I do know people. You've been quieter lately. Did I do something wrong? His eyes softened immediately. No, not at all. Then what is it? She asked softly. He hesitated, looking torn. It's the staff, the rumors. I didn't want to make things harder for you. She blinked. You heard them? He nodded. Of course I did, and I hated every word. Daniel, she began, before stopping herself realizing she'd said his first name. But he didn't seem to mind. His lips curved slightly. You're the only one who said it in a long time. She felt her cheeks warm. I didn't mean... It's fine, he said quietly. Actually, I like it. For a moment, the tension dissolved. They stood there, the air thick with something unspoken. But then Daniel broke the silence. Still, I need to keep things professional. For Lily's sake, for yours. Emily swallowed hard and nodded. Of course. I understand. She turned to leave, but before she could step away, he said her name again. Emily? She stopped. His voice was low. You've done more for this family than you realize. Don't ever doubt that. Her chest ached, and she gave a small nod without turning back. Good night, Mr. Stone. When she reached her room, she leaned against the door, her heart pounding. Every time he tried to build walls, she felt herself breaking through them not on purpose, but because she cared. And that was dangerous. Downstairs, Daniel sat in silence, staring at the faint reflection of himself in the window. He wasn't angry at her, he was angry at himself. Because for the first time in years, another woman's voice had found its way into his thoughts, and he didn't want to let it go. It rained the next evening, the kind of steady, quiet rain that made the world slow down. The children were in bed early, the house calm, except for the soft hum of thunder in the distance. Emily stood by the kitchen counter finishing the dishes, when the power suddenly flickered. Then everything went dark. She froze. Oh, great. Stay where you are, came Daniel's voice from the hallway. She heard the shuffle of his steps, then the glow of a flashlight cutting through the dark. The storm must have knocked out the grid. She smiled faintly. Guess even billionaires can't control the weather. He let out a quiet laugh, rare, soft. Unfortunately, no. I've tried. He moved closer, the light catching the edge of his face, the strong jaw, the tired eyes that somehow still held warmth. Are you okay? I'm fine. Just wasn't expecting a blackout. He nodded toward the stairs. I'll check the backup generator. Could you stay with the kids until it's back on? Of course. As he turned to leave, thunder cracked loudly, and the sound made her flinch. Without thinking, she reached out, her hand brushing his arm. Daniel stopped. The flashlight wavered slightly. Their eyes met in the dim light close, too close, and for a long heartbeat, neither of them moved. Her hand fell away slowly. "Sorry," she murmured. His voice was low, rough. "Don't be." The air between them shifted. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It pulsed, charged with everything they'd both been trying to ignore. A few minutes later, the power hummed back to life. Lights flickered on one by one, chasing away the shadows. Emily exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath the whole time. Daniel set the flashlight down. "Generator's working again." "Good," she said softly. He lingered by the doorway. "You should get some rest." "I will." But neither of them moved. His gaze traveled over her face, lingering on the faint curl of her hair that had slipped free, the gentle steadiness in her eyes. "You really do make this place feel different," he said quietly. "Different how?" He hesitated, searching for words. "Warmer." Emily felt her throat tighten. "It's just nice to see Lily laugh again. That's all I wanted." His expression softened. "And what about you, Emily? What do you want?" She froze, caught off guard by the question and by the way he said her name like meant something. "I want..." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter." Daniel stepped closer, his voice lower now. "It does to me." Her heart pounded, her voice barely above a whisper. "You shouldn't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because people already talk, and because..." She took a small breath. "Because it's dangerous." He looked at her for a long, unreadable moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right." But the way he said it didn't sound like agreement. It sounded like regret. He stepped back, putting distance where there hadn't been any. "Good night, Emily." "Good night, Daniel." When she was alone, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring out at the rain streaking the window. Her chest felt heavy, full of things she couldn't name. And across the hall, Daniel poured himself a glass of whiskey he didn't drink. He stared into the amber liquid, thinking about the warmth in her eyes, the sound of her voice in the dark, and how long it had been since he'd felt this alive. He told himself he'd stop it, that it couldn't go anywhere. But his heart had already stopped listening. The morning after the storm, the house looked the same, neat, bright, calm, but nothing felt the same. Emily moved through her routines with steady hands and an unsteady heart. Daniel was distant again, though not cold. He greeted her politely, asked about Lily's breakfast, but his eyes never stayed on hers for long. It was as if they'd both silently agreed to erase what had happened the night before, that breathless moment in the dark, when the air between them had almost become something else. But hearts don't forget that easily. By midday, a visitor arrived, a woman in a crisp black coat and red lipstick. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floor as the housekeeper announced her. "Mr. Stone, your associate is here," Mrs. Harper said. Emily had just stepped into the hall when Daniel appeared from his study. He paused at the sight of the woman and managed a polite smile. "Claire, I wasn't expecting you today." Claire smiled back, tilting her head. "I was in the area. Thought I'd stop by and discuss the charity gala next month. Unless now's a bad time?" "Not at all," he said. Emily watched them from the doorway, her hands tightening around the tray she was holding. The woman's confidence filled the room. Her perfume lingered like a quiet claim. They looked good together, like two people who belonged in the same world. When Claire noticed Emily, her eyes flickered over her, a quick, assessing glance. "And who's this?" Daniel's voice was calm. "This is Emily Parker, She's Lily's nanny. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Of course, the famous nanny I've been hearing about. Emily forced a small, polite smile. Nice to meet you. Claire turned back to Daniel. She's lovely, she said, too sweetly. You always did have good taste. Emily's stomach tightened, though she didn't understand why. She nodded once, murmured an excuse, and slipped out before her face could betray her. In the kitchen, she tried to shake it off. He's your boss, she told herself. He's allowed to have a life. A woman like her probably fits better in it anyway. But her hands still trembled when she poured Lily's juice. When Daniel came in later, he looked distracted. Are you all right? He asked quietly. Emily didn't look up. Of course, why wouldn't I be? He frowned. You seem distant. She gave a short laugh. I could say the same about you. He hesitated. Claire and I go way back. She used to work with Isabella on some of her projects. That's all. Emily nodded. You don't owe me an explanation, Mr. Stone. Daniel, he corrected gently. Her eyes lifted to his. That's not a good idea right now. Something flickered in his expression. Regret, maybe? Or realization? You're angry. I'm not angry, she said too quickly. I just don't know where I stand anymore. He stepped closer. You stand where you've always stood here, with us. You've done more for Lily, for this house. I wasn't asking about the house, she whispered. That silenced him. The words hung between them like fragile glass, too delicate to touch. Daniel took a breath, his voice low. Emily, I don't know what this is between us. I just know that when you're not around, it feels wrong. Her heart skipped painfully. You can't say that. You know why? He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. And yet, neither of them moved away. It was Lily's voice that broke the tension, calling from upstairs. Daddy! Daniel blinked, stepping back like a man waking from a dream. I should go. Emily turned away before he could see the tears that had started to form. Of course. Good night, Mr. Stone. He paused in the doorway, his jaw tightening as if he wanted to say something, then left without another word. That night, as the rain began again outside, Emily sat by her window, holding her son's hand as he slept beside her. She told herself she was strong, that she could handle this, that it was just a job. But deep down, she knew the truth. She had fallen for a man who belonged to a world she would never fit into, and every time he said her name, she forgot that. The week after Claire's visit passed in uneasy quiet. The air in the mansion had changed again, not cold this time, but uncertain. Daniel buried himself in work, spending long hours in his study or on calls. Emily focused on Lily and Noah, pretending that nothing had shifted, even though her heart said otherwise. She missed their quiet talks, his rare smiles, the way he always seemed to notice when she needed help. Now he barely looked at her, and that hurt more than she expected. On Thursday afternoon, Emily took the children to the park nearby. It was sunny and calm, the kind of day that made her forget for a moment who she worked for and where she lived. Lily and Noah were chasing each other near the swings when a familiar voice called out behind her. Emily Parker? She turned, surprised. It was Ethan Blake, a friend from her old neighborhood, a kind man with easy charm and a smile that could soften anyone's guard. Ethan, she said, laughing. It's been ages. I thought that was you, he said warmly. You still look the same, just busier. She smiled. I'm a nanny now. He raised a brow.
For the billionaire, right? Daniel Stone? Emily nodded shyly. You heard? Everyone's heard? He said with a chuckle. That man's name is everywhere. How's he treating you? She hesitated. He's fair, strict, but kind. Ethan grinned. Strict sounds boring. You need someone to make you laugh again? Emily laughed softly. I'm fine, Ethan. Still, she couldn't deny the warmth that came from seeing a friendly face someone who didn't look at her like a servant or a rumor. What she didn't notice was Daniel's car parked across the street. He had left a meeting early and decided to check on Lily only to find Emily in the park, laughing with a man he didn't recognize. He stayed in the car longer than he should have, watching as Ethan handed her a cup of coffee and made her laugh again. The sight twisted something inside him he hadn't felt in years, a sharp, unfamiliar ache that burned beneath his calm exterior. When he finally stepped out, his expression was controlled, but his voice carried an edge. Miss Parker, he said, making her jump. Emily turned quickly, startled. Mr. Stone, I didn't see you. I can tell, he said evenly. And who's this? Ethan offered a polite hand. Ethan Blake, an old friend of Emily's. Daniel didn't shake it. I see. His eyes lingered on Emily for a moment too long before he said, Lily, Noah, it's time to go. The children obeyed without question. Emily said a quick goodbye to Ethan, promising to catch up later, but Daniel was already walking ahead, his jaw tight. The car ride home was silent. Lily and Noah were half asleep in the back, unaware of the tension in the front seats. Emily finally spoke. You didn't have to be so cold to him. He was just saying hello. Daniel's eyes stayed on the road. I didn't realize my employees held social visits during work hours. Her chest tightened. It was barely 10 minutes. He didn't answer. Are you angry with me? She asked quietly. He sighed, gripping the steering wheel. No, I'm angry with myself. She frowned. For what? For caring, he said under his breath. Her heart stopped. Daniel. He cut her off gently. I shouldn't have said that. Forget it. But she couldn't, not when his voice cracked on the word caring. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. Every word replayed in her mind, the look in his eyes, the way he'd clenched his jaw like he was fighting something inside himself. She wasn't sure what scared her more, that he cared, or that she did too. Across the hall, Daniel stood by his window, his reflection caught between light and shadow. He had spent years mastering control over his company, his grief, his life. But this woman, this gentle, quiet, stubborn woman, was undoing it piece by piece. And for the first time, Daniel Stone didn't know how to stop falling. The house was quiet that night. The kind of quiet that had weight, heavy, thoughtful, expectant. Rain pattered softly against the windows again, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled low. Emily sat on the couch in the small sitting room beside Lily's bedroom, folding laundry she'd already folded twice. She wasn't tired, her thoughts wouldn't let her be. She kept replaying the moment in the car. I'm angry with myself, for caring. Those words had lodged somewhere deep inside her, where they refused to leave. When a knock came at the door, she jumped slightly. Come in, she said softly. Daniel stepped inside. He looked tired, his tie gone, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly mussed. But his eyes looked restless. I didn't mean to bother you, he said, his voice lower than usual. It's all right, she said. I couldn't sleep anyway. He hesitated, his hand brushing the doorframe. I wanted to apologize. For earlier the park, the things I said. She shook her head. You don't have to. I do, he said firmly. You didn't do anything wrong, Emily. I did. She looked up at him. Why does it feel like we're always apologizing to each other? His lips curved faintly. Maybe because we keep saying things we're not supposed to. That made her smile a small, sad smile. You mean things that could ruin everything? Something like that, he said quietly. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The air between them felt alive, trembling with everything unsaid. Daniel, she whispered, you can't keep looking at me like that. He stepped closer. Like what? Like I'm someone you shouldn't want. He stopped, only a few feet away now. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. Her breath caught. The room felt smaller, the air warmer. She could hear her heart beating faster, or maybe it was his. Daniel, she said again, but this time it came out softer. He exhaled shakily. You've changed everything. This house, Lily, me. I was numb for years, Emily. Then you walked in, and suddenly everything feels real again. I don't know what to do with that. Her eyes stung. You don't have to do anything. I do, he said, his voice rougher now. Because every time I see you, I want to say something I'm not allowed to say. Then don't, she whispered. Because if you do, I don't know if I'll be strong enough to stop you. That silence again, the one that always spoke louder than words. Daniel took one slow step closer. Tell me to go, he said quietly. Emily didn't move. Tell me to leave, and I will. Her lips trembled. I can't. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Then he reached up slowly, carefully, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, as if he'd been waiting years to remember how it felt. Her eyes closed. Daniel. He leaned in, not quite touching, his breath warm against her skin. Tell me this isn't real, and I'll stop. But she didn't. She couldn't. When his lips finally met hers, it wasn't desperate. It was quiet, aching, and full of everything they'd both been too afraid to say. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing unsteadily. This can't happen, she whispered. I know, he said softly, but it just did. They stood there in silence, the rain whispering against the glass, a witness to the moment that would change everything. That night, Emily lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her lips still tingled, her heart still ached. She knew it was wrong, dangerous even, but for the first time in years, she'd felt seen. And in his study, Daniel sat at his desk, his head in his hands. He'd built empires, made impossible deals, controlled everything in his reach. But he couldn't control this, the way one woman had made him remember what it meant to be alive. The next morning felt heavier than usual. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still gray, as if the world itself wasn't sure what to make of what had happened the night before. Emily woke early, though she hadn't really slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt his touch again, the warmth of his hand, the way his voice had broken when he said her name. It hadn't been planned. It hadn't even felt like a choice. It was something raw and honest that neither of them could take back. She stood by the window, watching the fog lift over the garden. You have to be smart, she told herself. You can't lose this job. You can't lose what you've built for Noah. Her heart whispered something else entirely, but she ignored it. At breakfast, Lily's chatter filled the silence. Daddy, Miss Emily said we could bake cupcakes today. Daniel looked up from his coffee, meeting Emily's eyes for the first time since the night before. There was no trace of what had happened between them, at least not on the surface. He gave a small, polite nod. That sounds nice, sweetheart. Can we make chocolate ones? Of course, Emily said softly, forcing a smile. We'll make plenty. She felt Daniel's gaze on her for a moment too long. Then he stood. I'll be working from home today, he said. Let me know if you need anything. Of course, Mr. Stone. The title, Mr. Stone, felt like a wall she had to rebuild just to breathe. The rest of the day passed in slow, careful steps. She avoided his study, stayed with the children, and pretended the world hadn't shifted. But every time she heard his footsteps down the hall, her pulse skipped. By late afternoon, as the cupcakes cooled on the counter, Mrs. Harper came into the kitchen, her expression uncertain. Miss Parker, there's a visitor for Mr. Stone. He asked to see you as well. Me? Emily frowned. Why would... Before she could finish, the sound of sharp heels echoed from the foyer. Claire. The elegant woman appeared in the doorway, her lips curved in that same perfect smile. Emily Parker, she said smoothly. Still here, I see. Emily wiped her hands on her apron. Yes, can I help you? I think you already have, Claire said, her tone light but edged. Word gets around, you know. People notice things, like how much time you spend in this house. Emily stiffened. I'm a live-in nanny, that's my job. Of course, Claire said, her smile growing. But from what I hear, you're very devoted. Before Emily could respond, Daniel entered the room. Claire? His voice was calm, but there was warning in it. She turned toward him, all charm. Relax, Daniel. I was just catching up with your... employee? Then catch up elsewhere, he said quietly. The words surprised them both. Claire blinked, the smile fading just enough to show her irritation. You've changed, she said. Isabella would have been disappointed to see this. That hit like a slap. Emily froze, her stomach twisting, while Daniel's expression hardened. Don't, he said sharply. Don't use her name to make a point. For a moment, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Then Claire lifted her chin, gave Emily one last cutting glance, and left without another word. When the door finally closed behind her, Daniel exhaled slowly. I'm sorry about that, he said, rubbing a hand over his face. Emily shook her head. You don't have to apologize for her. Yes, I do. She shouldn't have spoken to you like that. It doesn't matter. It does, he said, stepping closer. You shouldn't be made to feel like you've done something wrong. She met his eyes, her voice trembling. Maybe I have, Daniel. Maybe we both have. He went still. You mean last night? Emily swallowed hard. It can't happen again. You know that, don't you? He nodded slowly, his eyes full of something between pain and restraint. I know, but knowing doesn't make it easier. She forced a shaky smile. Sometimes the right thing never is. He looked at her for a long moment, then stepped back. You're right. We'll keep things professional. But when he left the room, she felt the weight of everything unspoken pressing harder than before. Because no matter how hard they tried to step back, love had already crossed the line. That night, Emily found herself standing outside Daniel's study door. She didn't knock. She didn't go in. She just stood there for a long moment, close enough to feel him on the other side of the wood before turning away. And inside, Daniel sat at his desk with the lights off, staring into the dark. He'd promised himself he'd never fall again. He just hadn't expected love to find him where grief used to live. The storm had passed, but the air in the mansion felt heavier than ever. Days moved on, but the memory of that night lingered between them like perfume that refused to fade. They kept their distance, speaking only when they had to, always polite, always careful, and yet every glance still carried what neither dared to name. Emily knew it couldn't last. She lay awake most nights, listening to the sound of rain or the soft creak of the hallway when Daniel walked past. Every step reminded her that she had built a home that didn't belong to her. That Monday morning, she made a decision. After dropping Lily at school, she stopped by a small cafe on the corner, ordered coffee she didn't drink, and wrote a letter on a napkin she'd folded 3 times before she could start. Mr. Stone, thank you for everything you've done for me and Noah. Working here has changed our lives, but I think it's time for me to move on. Please know this isn't because of you or Lily. It's because I need to do what's right, before I stay somewhere my heart isn't supposed to. Emily. The words looked final, but her hand shook as she set the pen down. When she returned, Noah was playing in the garden with Mrs. Harper, and Daniel was in the study on a call. She slipped the folded letter onto his desk and turned to leave. She was halfway down the hall when she heard his voice. Emily. He was standing in the doorway, holding the letter, his eyes searching hers. What is this? Her throat tightened. You weren't supposed to see it until later. Well, I did, he said, stepping closer. You're leaving? She nodded. It's for the best. For who? He asked quietly. Because it's certainly not for Lily. She'll be fine, Emily whispered. She has you. That's not the point. His voice cracked slightly. She needs you. I need you. She looked away, blinking fast. You don't mean that. He exhaled sharply. I do. Maybe I shouldn't. But I do. Daniel. He ran a hand through his hair, the mask he always wore slipping. I spent years building walls around this house around myself and you just walked in and tore them down. I can't lose that again. Her eyes filled. I didn't come here to be needed. I came to give Noah a safe place, to start over. But now I'm lost in something I can't have. He took another step forward. Then stay. Don't make this about what we can't have. Make it about what we do. People talk, she said softly. They already do. And someday, Lily will too. What then? He stopped, the pain in his eyes answering for him. Emily reached up and brushed a tear from her cheek. You once told me silence used to hurt. Don't let me be the reason it does again. Daniel's voice was a whisper. Emily, please. She shook her head gently. Goodbye, Daniel. She walked past him before her heart could change its mind. That night, she sat on Noah's bed, stroking his hair while he slept. She wanted to be strong, to believe this was the right choice, but every corner of the room held a memory, laughter, warmth, love she never meant to find. Across the hall, Daniel sat in the dark, staring at the empty space on his desk where her letter had been. He told himself she was right that letting her go was the responsible thing to do. But responsibility had never felt so much like heartbreak. By morning, the mansion felt wrong. The air was still. The house too quiet, as if it already knew someone was leaving. Emily packed quietly before breakfast, just a few clothes, Noah's favorite toy, and the memories she couldn't fit in a suitcase. She planned to tell Lily goodbye after school. That seemed easier a clean break, but fate didn't wait for her plan. Lily burst into the kitchen earlier than usual, her school bag half open, her hair still tangled from sleep. Miss Emily, she cried. Mrs. Harper said you're leaving. You're not leaving, right? Emily froze, her hands tightening on the counter. Sweetheart, Lily's voice wavered. Did I do something wrong? Emily knelt down quickly, pulling her into a hug. No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. You've been the best part of my days. Then why do you have to go? Emily swallowed the lump in her throat. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices. But Daddy said we're a family now. Emily's eyes filled. He said that? Lily nodded fiercely. He said you make the house happy again. He said you help him smile. That means you're family. Emily hugged her tighter, tears slipping down her cheeks. Oh, sweetheart. I'll always love you like family. Behind them, Daniel stood in the doorway, silent. He'd heard everything. When Lily finally went upstairs, Daniel stepped forward. Were you really going to leave without saying goodbye to me? Emily straightened, her voice trembling. I couldn't. If I looked at you, I'd lose the strength to go. Then don't go, he said simply. Daniel. He shook his head. No, I can't let you walk away like this. Not when everything in me is telling me to stop you. You're not thinking clearly. This isn't just about us. Yes, it is, he said, his voice low, urgent. It's about us, and Lily, and the way this house finally feels alive again. It's about you walking into our lives, and giving us back something I thought was gone forever. Emily blinked back tears. I can't replace her. I'm not asking you to, he said. I'm asking you to stay because of who you are, not because of who she was. The words broke something open inside her. She turned away, covering her face with her hands. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. He moved closer. I'm saying I love you. The world seemed to stop. Emily's breath caught. Don't. I do, he said firmly. I've tried not to. I've told myself every reason why I shouldn't. But I can't lie anymore. She stared at him, every wall she'd built trembling. Daniel. He took her hand, his voice soft but steady. You don't have to say it back. Just don't leave. Tears slid down her face. You don't understand. Loving you would cost me everything. He shook his head. No, Emily. Loving you gave me everything back. From the staircase, a small voice whispered, Daddy? They both turned. Lily stood halfway down the stairs, holding her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide and confused. Daniel knelt. Sweetheart, what are you doing up? I don't want Miss Emily to go, she said, her voice trembling. Can't she stay with us? Please? Emily pressed a hand to her mouth, her heart breaking. Daniel looked up at her, the same helpless love mirrored in his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't see a billionaire or a boss. She saw a man willing to fight for something real. He reached for her hand again, quietly, gently. Stay. Emily looked at Lily, at Daniel, and then at the door that led out to a life she didn't want anymore. Her heart whispered the answer before her voice did. I'll stay, she said softly, but not because you asked me to. Because I want to. Lily squealed, running down to hug them both, her laughter filling the kitchen like sunlight after a storm. Daniel closed his eyes, pulling them both close. For the first time in years, he wasn't holding on to the past, he was holding on to the future. For a few precious days, the mansion breathed again. Lily's laughter returned. Noah's drawings covered the fridge. Daniel smiled more often, small, quiet smiles that never reached the world outside the house, but always reached Emily. She stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, but because every morning when she opened her eyes, she felt something she hadn't in years, belonging. Still, part of her worried it was all too perfect. Happiness, she'd learned, had a way of testing how much you could hold before it fell apart again. It was Friday afternoon when the first crack appeared. Daniel was in his office when Mrs. Harper knocked softly. "Sir, there's a visitor asking to see you. She says it's urgent." Daniel frowned. "Who?" The older woman hesitated. "A Miss Carter. She says she used to work with your wife." The name froze him. "Send her in." Emily was just outside the study with Lily helping her gather art supplies when she saw the woman enter. Mid-40s, dark coat, serious expression, carrying a folder that looked far too heavy for something as simple as memories. She heard Daniel's tone change low, clipped, cautious. Then the words she caught made her chest tighten. "You should have told me this sooner. We didn't think it mattered, not after Isabella passed." "Of course it matters." When the door finally opened, Daniel stepped out looking pale, his jaw tense. Emily rose from the floor. "Is everything all right?" He blinked, as if he hadn't realized she was there. "Yes, it's nothing. Just old business." But it wasn't nothing. She could see it in his eyes. Whatever that woman had said had shaken him. That night, after dinner, Daniel sat outside on the terrace staring into the dark garden. Emily found him there, his untouched drink beside him. "You've been quiet all evening," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Do you ever feel like just when you start to fix something, the past reminds you it's still broken?" She stepped closer. "What happened?" He took a slow breath. "That woman, Miss Carter, she worked for Isabella years ago, before the company took off. And she brought files, letters. My wife had been funding something privately before she died, a research project under another name, and one of the accounts tied to it is still active." Emily frowned. "Is that bad?" "It's not just the money," he said, his voice tightening. "There were records, personal ones, notes she left about her illness, and about Lily. Things she never told me." He rubbed his forehead. "It turns out Isabella wasn't just hiding how sick she was. She was trying to protect me from something she thought might come after." Emily's heart sank. "Come after what?" He met her eyes then, weary and unguarded. "Our company. Our family. Everything she thought could fall apart if the truth ever got out." Emily knelt beside him. "Daniel, whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone." He looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "That's exactly what she said to me before she died." The ache in his voice made her chest tighten. She reached for his hand, not as comfort, but as promise. "You're not her," he said after a moment, almost to himself. "But somehow, you've brought her peace back into this house." Emily's throat tightened. "Then let me stay, not just for Lily, but for you. Whatever this is, we'll face it together." He didn't speak, but his fingers closed gently around hers. The night air was cold, but between their hands there was warmth, the kind that came when two people had already lost too much and were finally brave enough to stop running from love. Inside the study, on Daniel's desk, the folder Miss Carter had brought sat half open. At the top of the pile was a single line written in Isabella's elegant handwriting. "If you're reading this, Daniel, it means what I feared has begun." The next morning came gray and restless. Daniel hadn't slept. The folder sat open on his desk, like a wound that refused to close. He'd read and reread Isabella's letter until the words blurred into ghosts of their meaning. "If you're reading this, Daniel, it means what I feared has begun." He didn't understand all of it yet. There were references to private accounts, coded names, and something about leaked medical data that didn't make sense. But what hurt most was the line near the end. I kept secrets from you not because I didn't love you, but because I did. He closed the folder with a shaky breath. Love and lies, he realized, often wore the same face. Emily found him at breakfast, still in his shirt from the night before, his coffee untouched. "Daniel," she said softly, "Lily's waiting for you. She made a drawing of all of us." He looked up, eyes clouded. "Of all of us?" She nodded. "You, me, Noah, and her holding hands. She said it's our family picture." Something in his expression cracked for just a second. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. "She's too good for this world." Emily studied him. "You didn't sleep, did you?" He shook his head. "There's something I need to show you." They went to his study, where he handed her the letter. She read it slowly, frowning at each cryptic line. "She was hiding something," Emily said finally. "But what?" Daniel exhaled. "She mentioned a project, something she started before the company grew. Miss Carter said it involved private medical data, research on a treatment that was never approved. Apparently, someone else is trying to claim it now." Emily looked up sharply. "Claim it?" He nodded. "A man from one of our former partners, he reached out last night. Said he has proof that what Isabella did could destroy our company's reputation if it ever got out." "So, they're blackmailing you?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "That's what it sounds like." Emily set the letter down. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet," he admitted. "If I fight back, it drags her name through the mud. If I pay them, I look guilty. And all I can think about is Lily, what happens to her if everything falls apart again." Emily stepped closer, her voice steady. "Then let me help you." He blinked. "Emily, I mean it," she said, her tone firm now. "You don't have to face this alone. You've carried too much by yourself for too long. Let someone stand beside you for once." He hesitated. "You shouldn't be part of this mess." She smiled sadly. "Too late. I already am." Something in his chest loosened at her words. He reached out, almost without realizing it, brushing his thumb over her hand. "You don't know what you do to me," he murmured. Emily's heart thudded. "Daniel." He pulled back slightly, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry. It's okay," she said softly. "Just promise me you won't shut me out." "I won't," he said, and this time he meant it. Later that afternoon, while Daniel left for a meeting with his lawyers, Emily stayed with the children. She was helping Lily paint when the house phone rang, a line no one used except staff. Mrs. Harper answered, her face draining of color. When she hung up, she turned to Emily. "That was Mr. Stone's office. His car never arrived. They said he left 20 minutes ago, but he hasn't shown up." Emily froze. "What do you mean, hasn't shown up?" "They're calling the police if they don't hear from him soon." The brush slipped from Emily's hand. The color from the painting bled across the paper, a streak of red spreading through blue and white. "Mommy," Lily whispered, her little voice trembling. "Where's Daddy?" Emily knelt beside her, forcing a calm smile. "He's okay, sweetheart. He'll be home soon." But her hands were already shaking. Deep down, something cold and certain told her this wasn't an accident. Someone had found out about Isabella's secret, and now they were coming for Daniel. The house went still after Mrs. Harper's call. Even the air felt wrong, too thick, too quiet, as if the walls were waiting for bad news. Emily's first thought was denial. He probably stopped for gas. The second was fear. What if he didn't? She dialed his number again, straight to voicemail. Then the driver's line. Nothing. Noah tugged on her sleeve. Mom, what's wrong? She tried to smile. Nothing, sweetheart. Go play with Lily for a bit, okay? But when he left, her hands trembled so hard she could barely hold the phone. By the time the police arrived, rain had started again. 2 officers stood in the foyer, polite but detached, asking questions that made her stomach twist. When was the last time you saw Mr. Stone? This morning. Any reason he might have left without telling anyone? Emily shook her head. He's not like that. He was supposed to meet his lawyer. He wouldn't just disappear. One of the officers scribbled notes. We'll notify the department if the vehicle's found. For now, stay by the phone. Stay by the phone. It sounded too small for something this big. That night, after Lily and Noah finally fell asleep, Emily sat in the living room, staring at the rain running down the glass. The fire had burned out hours ago. Mrs. Harper brought her tea she didn't drink. You should rest. I can't. The older woman sighed softly. He'll come home, dear. Men like Mr. Stone always find their way back. But Emily wasn't so sure. She went to his study, searching for anything that might help. The folder from Isabella was still on the desk. She opened it, flipping through the papers by the light of a single lamp. There, tucked behind the letters, was an address. Ravenhill Labs, Portland. And a note in Daniel's handwriting. Meeting at noon. Confidential. Her pulse quickened. That's where he went. By morning, she'd made up her mind. She left Noah and Lily with Mrs. Harper and caught the first bus out of town. The city grew smaller in the window behind her, gray skies hanging low over the highway. She kept replaying his last words. I love you. If that was the last thing he ever said to her, she would never forgive herself for letting him go alone. Ravenhill Labs wasn't a lab anymore. It was an abandoned industrial building, the kind that looked like it had been empty for years. A padlock hung broken on the gate. Inside, the halls smelled of rust and rainwater. Daniel? She called, her voice echoing. No answer. Then, faintly, something. A muffled sound, metal shifting against concrete. She followed it down a corridor and found a side room with a flickering light. Daniel sat against the wall, his wrists bound, a cut on his temple. His eyes widened when he saw her. Emily. Relief hit so hard it hurt. Oh my God, Daniel. She rushed to him, trying to untie the ropes with shaking hands. What happened? He winced. They wanted the files, Isabella's research. They thought I had them. Who? Before he could answer, a shadow moved at the door. A man stepped in. Broad, dark coat, expression cold. Well, he said, looks like we have company. Emily froze, shielding Daniel instinctively. The man smiled thinly. You must be the nanny. Daniel's voice was rough. Let her go. This has nothing to do with her. Oh, but it does, the man said quietly. Your wife started something she couldn't finish. And now, thanks to your new friend, maybe we finally can. He raised a phone, showing a photo. Lily and Noah, playing in the garden. Emily's blood ran cold. Don't you touch them, she said, her voice shaking but fierce. The man's smile widened. Then you'll give me what I want. Emily's heart pounded, but her eyes met Daniel's. For the first time, she saw no fear there, just a silent promise. They were in this together now. Whatever Isabella had left behind, whatever danger it carried, love had already made them family. And family was worth fighting for. For a long moment, time stood still. Emily could hear her own heartbeat echoing in the cold, empty room, the only sound between the man's calm voice and Daniel's strained breathing. Give me the drive,
the man said. The one your wife left you. Then maybe no one else has to get hurt. Daniel's jaw tightened. I don't have it. The man crouched down, his tone still mild. You're lying. Isabella kept copies. You're the only one who could know where they are? Emily's mind raced. Drive? Files? Then she remembered something, the old jewelry box in Daniel's study. The one he'd told Lily not to touch. It wasn't jewelry at all, was it? She took a slow breath. Let me get it, she said quietly. If I bring it, you'll leave him and the children alone. The man turned to her, amused. Brave. But how do I know you won't call the police? You don't, she said. But you already said I'm a nanny. You think I'd risk those kids? He studied her for a moment, then smirked. You've got 10 minutes. Daniel's eyes flashed with alarm. Emily, no. She looked at him, her voice steady but soft. Trust me. Outside, the rain had started again, a hard, steady rhythm that drowned out her pounding heart. She ran through puddles, through the broken gate, into the nearest stretch of road. There were no cars in sight. She ducked behind an old truck, catching her breath. Then she pulled out her phone, hands shaking. Mrs. Harper, she whispered when the woman answered. Call the police, now. Tell them Daniel's been taken to Ravenhill Labs. Dear Lord, Mrs. Harper gasped. What about you? I'm going back, Emily. I can't leave him. She hung up before she could lose her nerve. When she returned to the building, the man was pacing near Daniel, tapping his phone impatiently. You're running out of time, sweetheart, he said. Emily forced her voice to stay calm. I have it. She held up a small metal case she'd found in Daniel's car earlier, the one she hoped looked convincing. The man reached for it. Good girl. But before he could open it, flashing lights swept across the cracked windows, red and blue slicing through the rain. Police sirens. The man cursed, spinning toward the door. Daniel lunged, catching him off guard. The two struggled, the sound of metal and fists filling the air. Emily grabbed a loose pipe and struck the man's arm, just as Daniel broke free. Go! He shouted. They ran down the hall, through the rain, past the rusted gates until Daniel collapsed against the hood of an abandoned car, gasping. Emily pressed a shaking hand to his chest. You're bleeding. It's nothing, he said, trying to catch his breath. Then he looked at her, his eyes soft despite the pain. You came back. Of course I did, she whispered. You think I'd let you do something stupid without me? He laughed a raw, broken sound and cupped her face with his trembling hand. You saved my life. No, she said, her voice trembling. You saved mine a long time ago. When the police arrived, the man was gone, vanished into the storm, but they found the folder and the shattered remains of what looked like a small flash drive. Whatever Isabella had protected had been real. As they wrapped Daniel's arm and led them to safety, Emily realized her hands were still clasped in his. He didn't let go, not even once. That night, in the hospital waiting room, Emily sat beside him. He was pale but alive, his arm bandaged, his voice quiet. She knew, he said finally. Isabella knew they'd come for it one day. That's why she kept it hidden. Why she left those letters. She wasn't protecting her work, she was protecting us. Emily touched his hand. Then you finished what she started. He looked at her for a long moment. No, he said softly. We did. As dawn broke, light spilled through the hospital windows, washing over them both. For the first time since everything began,
Daniel smiled, not the polite smile he gave the world, but the one meant only for her. "You're not going anywhere again," he said quietly. Emily smiled through tears. "You're not giving me a choice, are you?" "No," he said, his fingers tightening around hers. "Not this time." 3 weeks later, the mansion felt alive again. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, chasing away the shadows that had lingered for years. Lily's laughter echoed through the halls. Noah's toy cars were lined across the living room floor, and somewhere in the kitchen, Mrs. Harper was humming while she baked. Life had found its way back in. Emily stood by the window, holding a mug of coffee, watching the two children race each other across the garden. For the first time in so long, her heart didn't ache with uncertainty. It felt steady, grounded, at peace. Daniel appeared behind her, his arm now free of bandages, his hair still damp from a morning shower. "You're up early," he said softly. She smiled. "You still don't know how to sleep in, do you?" He chuckled. "Habit of a man who thought he always had to be in control." "And now?" she teased. He stepped closer, resting his hand lightly on her waist. "Now I've learned some things are better when you stop trying to control them." Emily turned to face him, her eyes warm. "You mean, like falling in love?" He smiled, a real smile this time. "Exactly, like that." Later that day, a lawyer from Isabella's old firm arrived with final paperwork. The mystery that had nearly destroyed them turned out to be something far gentler than they'd feared. Isabella's project had been a fund secret, yes, but meant to help families who couldn't afford the treatment that once saved her own life. She'd hidden it to keep it safe from corporate greed, afraid it would be turned into profit. And when Daniel looked through her final notes, he found something that broke him in the best way, a letter addressed to him. "If you're reading this, it means you finally let someone love you again. That's all I ever wanted, Daniel. Don't live in my shadow. Live." Emily found him sitting by the fireplace after reading it, the letter trembling slightly in his hands. She didn't speak. She just knelt beside him, laying her head on his shoulder. He exhaled slowly, the tension leaving his body. "She forgave me before I even knew what to ask forgiveness for?" he whispered. "She wanted you to be happy," Emily said softly. "Maybe she knew how you'd find it." He turned to her, his voice barely a breath. "I did." That evening, the four of them ate dinner together, no business calls, no silence, no ghosts left between them. Lily talked about school, Noah bragged about how he could ride his bike without help, and Daniel and Emily just listened, exchanging small glances that said more than words could. When the children were asleep, they stepped outside to the garden, the night air cool and calm. The fountain murmured softly nearby. Daniel reached for her hand. "You came into my life when it was falling apart," he said quietly. "You didn't fix it. You just reminded me it was still worth holding on to." Emily smiled through the tears that filled her eyes. "You made me believe in more than survival. You made me believe in love. Again." He leaned forward, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his voice tender. "Then let's keep believing together." When he kissed her, it wasn't the desperate kind they'd shared in secret nights. It was slow, steady, certain, the kind of kiss that belonged to people who had finally found home. Later, as she tucked Lily and Noah in, Lily stirred sleepily and whispered, "Miss Emily, are you going to be my mommy now?" Emily froze for a heartbeat, her eyes meeting Daniel's in the doorway. His expression softened, filled with quiet emotion. Emily smiled and whispered back, "If that's okay with you." Lily's lips curved into a sleepy grin. It's more than okay. In the stillness that followed, Daniel wrapped an arm around Emily as they stood by the doorway, watching the children dream. This house doesn't feel empty anymore, he murmured. It never will again, she said. And when they turned off the lights, the laughter, the love, and the promise of tomorrow stayed, filling every corner of the mansion that had once been silent.